Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Kravis Center Chief Executive Officer, Diane Quinn.
Good afternoon, everyone. So fantastic to see so many familiar faces. Welcome to today's event, and welcome, of course, to the Kravis Center for the Performing Arts. It gives me a great pleasure to, first of all, acknowledge Susan Bloom, the sponsor of today's Lunch and Learn. You may not be aware, but Susan is a Kravis Center founder member and a sponsor of our Lunch and Learn program since 2014. Thank you so much. And as importantly today, she is a great friend of our speaker, Stephen Caras, today, who you're, of course, going to hear a lot of. I had the privilege of meeting Mr. Caras my first week as the new CEO of the Kravis Center, which was about 6 weeks ago, for those of you keeping score. And immediately, I could tell that he was someone very special. He can tell you what I said to him if you're speaking with him later today. Many of you know him as the Kravis Center has been fortunate to have Stephen involved with us in our educational programming for more than 20 years, which is an incredible feat. So thank you for that, Stephen. He is a former dancer with the New York City Ballet, and also is a renowned dance photographer. He lectures and he teaches across the country, and he is the subject, as some of you might know, he is the subject of the Emmy Award-winning PBS documentary entitled Stephen Caras, See Them Dance. But I wanted to tell you what I have come to appreciate with Stephen. It is that he is a very active member with many causes that support the arts, and of course, I am a huge supporter of the arts. And if you have not seen his 2017 TEDx talk, I really invite you to do so. This talk is a masterclass in communication, a masterclass in terms of what it feels like to be different and not feel like you fit in. So please check it out on YouTube if you haven't already seen it. We are pleased to have Stephen as a featured speaker at the Kravis Center in our Beyond the Stage program, where he leads both pre- and post-performance talks for many of our dance and our Broadway productions. In fact, you can find him leading a talk prior to the performance of the Complexions Contemporary Ballet here at the Kravis on the 2nd of April, so hope to see you there. But before I invite him to the stage, let's take a moment as we share a glimpse into the life and the talent of Mr. Stephen Caras.
Stephen Caras began his ballet training at the age of 15. And in just 3 short years, rose to become one of George Balanchine's hand-chosen dancers in the New York City Ballet.
Again, I got up my nerve, and I went to the School of American Ballet, and I auditioned.
He had what Mr. Balanchine wanted, which was the energy, the attack, strong technique. Balanchine wanted dancers who were interesting to look at, somebody you wanted to watch, and that was Stephen.
He went on to dance worldwide in numerous masterworks, choreographed by Balanchine and Jerome Robbins. Towards the end of his 14 years of dancing professionally, Steve discovered a second passion: photography. His close relationship with Balanchine gave him the rare opportunity to photograph all aspects of the company. His deep understanding of and passion for the art resulted in his capturing the true beauty and intricacies of each dancer and the works they performed from the very start.
He knew it should be someone that thoroughly understood ballet. So when I asked Mr. Balanchine if I could photograph, he welcomed me into it and gave me privileged access, truly, to this private world.
I have an advantage, especially with Balanchine's ballets, because I've seen them so many times and danced them a lot. I know the steps. I know what's coming next.
And when I heard Mr. Balanchine say, I need this picture, I need this picture, I realized I had an excuse to belong to the world that I loved for the rest of my life. And that's the day I knew I was a photographer.
It wasn't long at all before Steve's gift as a photographer was recognized by many.
He had the advantage of being a fantastic dance photographer because he was a dancer himself. So he knew exactly from what angle to take the picture. He knew exactly when to snap.
Today, he is revered as one of the most prolific photographers of dance in the genre's history. His photographic archive spans over 4 decades to the present, consisting of some 120,000 plus images. Images that serve as vital tools for research and educational purposes, while inspiring greater interest in dance and those who have brought it to life. A multifaceted, multi-gifted alchemist, Steve continues to photograph, lecture, and guest teach across the country. He's a devoted advocate, giving his time and talents to causes that are near and dear to him, including the Kravis Center's arts education programs. Rosie's Theater Kids, one of New York's foremost arts initiatives serving public school children, and, naturally, dance across the boards. The Emmy Award-winning PBS documentary, Stephen Caras, See Them Dance, recounts his incredible journey in the world of ballet and photography. Today, Steve picks up where the documentary left off, sharing some of his personal milestones, setbacks, and struggles with sexuality, all in tandem with many of the greatest dancers the world has ever known. Survival Instinct starts now.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Stephen Caras.
I'm going to sit because that film made me tired. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Yeah, you can see enough of me, right? Thank you to the Kravis Center. It takes a village and a functional one, never mind a talented one at that. Thank you very much for all of this. I really appreciate it. Thank you to Susan, as you heard mentioned by Diane Quinn. Thank you, Diane Quinn, for that beautiful introduction. And thank you to all of you. I know there is a bunch of friends here, my whole mishpucha, my whole family, my relatives are here, but also some newcomers. And I think you should be aware of the fact that your support of the Kravis Center at any level feeds education. And that translates to young people, people who could not be exposed to the arts normally under their circumstances, and the magic that comes of that. You should see the faces on these young people when the curtain goes up. That's what we should be filming, of course, the stage as well. And what they see are artists of all genres, sizes, colors, talents, paying forward their gifts with no apologies. And that is contagious. And that they bring back to their day-to-day lives. And they're different. They say, well, I love this. I'm going to focus on it more and feel good about it because of what I was exposed to. Thank you very much, all of you, because whether you know it or not, the number of kids whose lives have changed to this day, 3 million, Kravis, 30 years. Now, Susan Bloom, no shaking of the embarrassed head. Susan Bloom was one of those visionaries standing behind Alex Dreyfus on this property when the only thing under their feet was a dream. And that 30 plus years later, here we are. Thank you to my best friend. Unlike many of you, I have no doctorates. I have no degrees. I have a diploma, high school diploma. The only thing otherwise, my formal training is classical ballet. It sounds limited to some. However, trust me, nothing could have prepared me better for life. 6 years ago, it was mentioned in that wonderful little film that I started work with Rosie's Theater Kids in New York. My first responsibility was to speak to an audience. Now, they named me Advocacy and Outreach, which translates to show me the money. So if you hear development director on the phone, sometimes you hang up before you hear director. But advocacy, that was a very elegant title. My first assignment was to speak to an audience. Subject, passing it on. It's one of our missions, as Kravis does. And that's the name of our spring gala. So I thought this is something we should be aware of since consciousness. Somebody treats you well, we're young, the hard drive has roots that take and stay. And so, you know how to treat other people nicely, right? Other things take as well. Very important how you are in front of young people. I researched Rosie. There she is. There I am near her. Because I only knew her as an actress. Actor, I better say the right term. And I thought we have three things in common. The obvious, which we won't get into just yet. The last name, I'm Greek and Irish. The Irish last name, I have cousins here, is O'Donnell, so we could be related. But most importantly, our lives changed because we were exposed to the performing arts. Rosie at 10 to a Broadway show on Broadway, me at 13 to a high school version of a Broadway show. Regarding survival instinct and the title of this talk, most of us have it physically, you know, like built-in airbags. If something comes flying at us, we don't do, come and get me. We do this. Personally, it's a different story, and that depends on our hard drive and what we have been recording and believing about ourselves. I was different since birth, and I knew it. So I acted as though everything was fine for several reasons. One, so my mother wouldn't worry about me, as if. My father would think I was just like the other guys, as if. And ditto with friends down the road, note the girlfriend. And my Greek grandmother, who is honoring the palm, I suppose, that day between the dress and the headpiece. What's with that freaking photo? And that's what, God, that's my mother smiling / dealing. Long story. P.S. I didn't mention I'm writing a book, and it's almost finished, my autobiography. Today's talk is the family-friendly version, so mini plug, stay tuned. I had a secret to hide, in the eyes of many, a shameful one. Unlike today, there was no way to research. Is there anyone out there like me.com or explore on social media for like-mindeds? We categorized human beings then. You were normal or you weren't. It was black and white. It was crazy. Although that's all I knew. Today, kids are like, first of all, not my idea to be down here on this planet. Number two, don't rush me. I'm figuring out who I am, what I am. Hence, the categories I personally am doing my best to keep up with. It was called heteronormative in those days. People still think this way, you know, a heteronormative classification. And to think 5 years ago, of course, in Teen Vogue, there was an article on the very uselessness of this category. Well, my youth was a lot longer than 5 years ago. When I took the stage at New York City Ballet on June 9th, 1969, when I was 18, not 4, as I would like to tell you. I may have only studied dance for 3 years and 4 months, but trust me, a veteran actor took the stage, or at least I thought I was one. I was very shy as a kid. None of my friends believe that. By the way, I wouldn't say I was effeminate, but I liked all the things girls liked. I had the first Barbie doll. Should have saved it. It would have been at least 3 houses in the country today. And I bought the Ken for equal opportunity, but I loved the Barbie. And I liked all things girls liked. Early on, I'd heard whispered comments, homo, queer, and worse. At first not referring to me, perhaps a Liberace moment, where he was sort of over the top. And that took root in my fertile hard drive. Unknowingly, people were passing on some damaging stuff because as we know, when you're young, fertile, it takes. So throughout my young years, I wore this nervous smile, trying to hide that terrible secret. In my parents, I had 2 extremes. My mom loved, mama's boy admitted, beautiful, loving, funny, wicked sense of humor, and great faith, a devout Catholic. I had 2 phenomenal brothers. One is still with us, Peter and Tracy. That's me in the middle. And I looked at this picture like the other day, and I thought my ears were just getting big because I'm old now. But look at the size of the ears in all 3 of us. What? Okay, should I feel better about it? I really don't. Mom used to take us to church every Sunday and rearrange us like chess pawns because we were all very different. They both had my back. They knew Steve was different. But we were at each other like boys are. One day when we became this lumpy size, Mom gathered us in the living room and she said, "You don't have to come to church with me anymore, just behave." And for the first time in our lives, we were silent, instinctually took hands and bowed our heads and started chanting, "There is a God." She's right, there is a God. She never force-fed us her faith, but her example gave a great argument for it. And I'll leave it at that. Dad, I thought he was beautiful, Greek, into the military, very successful businessman, vice president at Gilman Paper Company in New York, workaholic, town council, very much involved in Republican politics, spoke at every freaking event known to man. But when he got home, he would sort of shut down, especially with me, because I was different. He would take a baseball bat, for instance, and pull it out of my hands. "Give me that!" Because I could not make contact with a ball, any ball. I couldn't get a ball in a hole, in a hoop, I could get hit with them very easily, but I couldn't. And it made him crazy, and same with the hedge clippers, anything I tried to have him love me about. And what he didn't realize was he was teaching me to doubt myself and to be afraid, but doubt myself not just as a technician, but worse as a human being. Anyway, so let's see, here we go. My escape, if you will, was television. In the day, black and white. And I loved variety shows. I was mesmerized by these aliens, and I didn't realize they were 20 miles away in New York. I thought they were on another planet, especially touched by the dancers because they got to communicate without speaking. So no one would say, "Shut up, you sound like a girl," which I had heard more than once. It wasn't so much my tone, it was my interests, which was heavy. At the end of 8th grade, something phenomenal happened for me. Like Rosie, I saw the high school production of a Broadway musical, and it changed my freaking life. Now, it's not the aliens in black and white. It's people I recognized, athletes to scholars, in unity, and just down the street. So I had a mission right now. I'm in 8th grade. 10th grade, I'll be in the high school and I can audition for whatever the show is. So I started practicing movement in the basement. I'd put the Shirelles on, I'd put anything on it. I shimmied religiously for 2 years. Then when I got into 10th grade, the show was Brigadoon. I auditioned, I made it as a dancer, not as a singer. It was an amazing experience, just like I had anticipated. And by the dress rehearsal, I was so excited and so kumbaya with the group that when the last scene, the scrim is down, the fog is going, the lovers are partying on stage, the chorus I didn't make it as a singer, right? I made it as a dancer only, is upstage singing, whisper singing, Brigadoon. So I joined in, kumbaya. Within seconds, I heard a mic. The orchestra stopped. The director got on the mic and he said, "Is Stephen Caras singing?" What? I thought, there were no cameras in those days, I said, "Yes, Mr. Zanzari." He said, "You are a dancer," which was a very nice way of saying, "Shut them up." So, here I am, scared to death with his finger up, but excited, scared to death. And then you saw this, working with bobby pins for the first time with a headpiece. There would be many in dance. And there's a sort of a hot mess of a dress rehearsal of the sword dance. I had male mentors for the first time, and positive ones. And this was enormous for me. And they told me, "You have movement quality." I didn't understand what that meant, but you must take ballet because you never know. It might lead to something. It's the foundation for all forms of dance. Within a week, I was enrolled in a ballet school. Mom said, "Let's not tell Dad." I said, "Well, duh." So here I am, like maybe 5 months later, not bad, considering 5 months, but a lot of shimmying up to Brigadoon, and then a good experience with Brigadoon. But my first ballet class, I went in not knowing what. I fell in love instantly. I said, I have to be a part of this world. I don't care what it is. I'll sweep the floors. I don't have to dance, but I want to be near it. There's an old Yiddish proverb that I learned about 100 years later, and it really refers primarily to serious matters. But it's, when one must, one can. Some people may know of that. That refers to if you have to deal. But I years later, I thought, that's how I felt about dance. It came with some stuff. Dad stopped talking to me, no surprise. But then the bullying started at school because the guy who went to another high school, who I confided in and I was very close with, told the guys in my high school, and this phone call stopped. Returning my phone call stopped. I was laughed at now in the hallways because they heard I was taking ballet, and they associated that with gay, which wasn't a word we even used then. And it broke my heart, but I dealt until it got bloody. Won't go into detail, but that's when my mother wanted to know what was going on, and I told her, I said, "Please, New York, next year, now that I know it's 20 miles away, maybe, I need to take 2 ballet classes a day to have any kind of a chance, not 2 a week." And she said, "If you're as good as they say you are, you'll get a scholarship. Do that and I'll handle the rest," which translated to your father. Had I not had the exposure, which is all about Kravis, all about Rosie's and many other good groups, I'm not sure how much survival instinct would have been left in me. Turns out I landed a scholarship at the Joffrey School. Is that the next picture? Yeah. That's Robert Joffrey on the right and Gerald Arpino, his main choreographer, in Manhattan. And Mom enrolled me in a professional children's high school. Patty Duke's name was scratched in one desk. Sal Minio's name was in another. I knew I was in the right place. The young people here won't know those names. Dad was pissed off, of course. Wouldn't let my mom take me to the bus, wouldn't let her pick me up, wouldn't let her leave me food on a hot plate. I didn't care. Yeah, it hurt. Yeah, it had an effect. What bothered me was I had a bully of a teacher at Joffrey, and I thought, didn't I just leave that? Mom and Dad, bullies in high school. He was an incredible teacher. The school syllabus was divine. And his wife, who taught at the school, was equally as strict but kind. And I dealt with it for a year. I grew, I made serious improvements, and then a scare. Mom had a cancer scare. It kind of sobered me up. And I stayed home for a day when she got home from the hospital, until she looked at me and said, "What the hell are you doing? Go back." I lived, okay? It was this big, it's gone. But it sobered me so much that I suddenly didn't have the passion for a while about dance. I thought it was ludicrous. And especially for that teacher who was such a freaking bully. And he used to give me private classes, topless, a little concerning, what? In a private studio. Turns out people thought he was gay. He never went there. But I made a knee-jerk decision, no plan B, to leave Joffrey. Superb training, by the way. I went to the Harkness School, assuming they would take the golden boy. They said, this happened in a year. Go back to where you came. We can't do that for you. Well, I couldn't go back. I mean, hell, I thought, here's a picture of me. Joffrey used me as the shapeless model for the dance skinheads. I thought, what? I should be, big life lesson. It was a learning experience, but it was a blessing, because they recommended the School of American Ballet, official school, New York City Ballet. Now, I'd never seen a performance of the New York City Ballet. I didn't know George Balanchine from George Burns, but I did see a performance at the end of my time at Joffrey, and it was A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I was blown away. And the guys in Act 2 were doing steps that were so simple, I thought, I can do that. Maybe I'll be in a small company someday. This was my introduction to George Balanchine and his magic. The audition for the School of American Ballet was, they said, you're old and you're chubby, but you have movement quality. Okay, so I'm hearing that again. Okay, into intermediate classes until we see that you've improved. If you have, we'll jump you up. Now, Joffrey dissected what you're doing and how to fix it, like Pilates, you know. New York City Ballet had teachers that were grand stars, Alexandra Danilova, Andrei Kramarevsky, and they performed the class, and it was survival of the fittest. So I had to watch and copy and learn. It wasn't special attention. I was one of many, and there were many gifted people there. I learned most from watching company members, because they would take our classes, and then now I'm sneaking into the ballet every night. And they wouldn't have a death grip on the bar. You know, they touched it just to find their balance. And they'd look in the mirror to correct all their positions. Once in the center, no more mirror looking at themselves, but positions, because there ain't no mirror when the curtain goes up, and that is a crutch. And I learned so much from that and from watching them. First year or so at the school, a little man came running in. And I said, who's that? And they said, that's Edward Villella. And I said, no, it's not. I've seen him on stage. He's huge. And she said, no, he just dances big. That's what you're learning here. So that connected a lot of dots for me. After 2 years at the school, the phone rang. It was, for me, now that was a first, it was Balanchine with his company director, Betty Cage, saying, if you're interested, Mr. Balanchine would like you to join the New York City Ballet. If so, this is Saturday, and come in on Monday and sign a contract. If I'm interested. I think I just hung up. I ran to the Port Authority, ran home, stayed up all night with my mother. The next morning, I'm dressed to kill, every penny I never made in my pockets. She said, what are you doing dressed up? I said, we're going to church. First time since pre-puberty. And she said, church? I said, desperate times, Mom, desperate times. So I threw every penny I never made into that damn basket they pass around, thinking, of course not at the time, well, you don't pay property taxes. I need this more than you do. No, I needed a miracle, and I knelt, I stood, I sat, I knelt, the whole choreography of Catholic Church. I said, I need a miracle. He has 3 days to change his mind, now 2. Signed my contract the next day. The next day I'm in company class taught by Balanchine, faced with 76 of, I'm number 77 now, of the thoroughbreds I so adored, admired, and worshiped. And Balanchine's class is a dissertation. Safe to say, ground zero. Depending on, if you were a star, you walked in there, you were like, say what? It was a whole learning, it was a finishing school. So now I'm the newest, most inexperienced, most undertrained, most terrified member of the New York City Ballet, but safe, I felt, at last. First company class, like I said, Balanchine watched me suffer through the bar, took me to the front of the room, patted me on the back, and said to his stable, this is our new Greek boy. We will make him strong. Now, he was fascinated with heritages, bloodlines, and he was, in fact, assigning his dancers to recognize a serious need and do something about it. The first ballet I danced was the first ballet I saw, A Midsummer Night's Dream. That's me in the dark in the background in the middle. Steps couldn't have been easier. I was petrified. But it wasn't long before I gained my sea legs, because thanks to my mom, I studied piano and I was musical. And overtime is not something dance companies want to pay. Time is money. So they threw me into a lot of things right off the bat, stuff I wasn't quite ready yet to perform. All this under two masters, George Balanchine and Jerome Robbins. And there I am in the back with a run in my tights, trying to fit in with the rest of them. These guys were like day and night, and I thought, here I go again. Opposites. When am I going to be safe? Get used to life, Caras. Didn't recognize that quite yet. I was still a bit starry-eyed. Jerome Robbins, famous. Do people know his history of meanness and cruelty? It's no secret. He's even written about it in his life. Dancers, people that have experienced Robbins, I thought, oh my God, the bully teacher at Joffrey, this is kid stuff compared to this. Jerry hated being Jewish, until his revelation with Fiddler on the Roof. He hated being gay, he hated being from Hoboken. You know, those lines formed to the left. He brought it to work with him. Just the opposite of Balanchine, who had many more problems than Jerry was born with, but they're different animals. Balanchine had been through the ringer before he was in the United States, and he's about 12 years or so older. Jerry's biggest issue was he preyed on the sensitivity in others to a sick degree. There's a story that many people know that when he was doing West Side Story and he was annihilating the group, he was most effective annihilating a single person. They were like this, listening to him. And they didn't say, oh, careful, and he backed up and fell headfirst into the orchestra pit. There's another story about Jerry where he was a little disturbed for a while that he was so cruel to other people, and he was famous for it and called on it, not like he would have been today. So he went to a shrink, and the shrink fixed him. Now he no longer felt bad about being cruel to people. How does a young target, all joking aside, handle this? Depends on your hard drive. What were you taught to learn as a young person? So he saw me as a prime target. Details in the book. When he had good days, they were incredible. I mean, when the sun was shining for Robbins, I used to say the only thing worse than working with him is not, because the experience in those ballets was pretty remarkable. Here's some pictures of me, and here I am working with him. I was 18, 19, 21. Same, 21, same. Parents came backstage one night when they saw this makeup for the first time, and my father was like, oh, Christ, my son. And Mom tried to make light of it, and she said, oh, honey, look how pretty Stephen looks. He looks just like Linda Lavin. I was like, Mom, really, Alice? Alice? I mean, she's a great actress, but could we, if you're gonna humiliate me in front of Dad, now that could you go for like Elizabeth Taylor the next time? Anyway. The Dybbuk, a flop by Jerry, but so much fun to dance, whatever. And wouldn't you know, the one picture that was on the cover of a brochure for a season is me sitting on the head of a ballerina. It was Jerry's greatest ballet, The Concert, a comedy ballet. That was a dress rehearsal because anal me said, oh my God, our shoes aren't even dyed to match the leotards yet. Okay, so Balanchine, whole different story. Jerry used to say, help me, when he couldn't figure something out. And we were like, okay, we'll try it again. Balanchine used to say, only you can help you, dear. And we'd try. And if it didn't work, he'd say, okay, we'll try something else. What a divine difference. Talk about day and night. When they said you have to dance bigger here and longer and extend, there I am with my arm way too high in the background, but I'm literally following. I loved partnering. I liked much more being behind a lady than being on my own. Let's see, here's square dance. I'm in the dark in the middle there, and that's Lourdes Lopez on your far left, on her way up to stardom, and then of course the rest is history, right? And that, my favorite part, a demi-solo and theme and variations. So, yeah, Regarding that secret of mine I kind of hinted at, I wasn't fooling anyone, except my girlfriend of 6 years, Elise. We were dancers together. We were bunheads, as we call it. We were fixated on improving and helping one another. But that secret of mine was not going to go anywhere, right? We had an innocent romance, both Catholics, so there was a point where you had to go to, and that was verboten otherwise after marriage, Saved by the Bell for me. Saved by the Bell, because anyway, guys hit on me, I froze. I'm 22 now. It says, Gelsey Kirkland hits on me, the superstar. That's a different story. Now, I wasn't attracted to her, but she could do 5 pirouettes to the left from 5th position. Maybe that doesn't make sense to you, but to a dancer, that's talking super dirty. She had my number right away after making out for a while. Elise was like, That was the one syllable reaction. And then she dropped me for a health club. No, not a hunk of a man, a health club. And during this period, I had been confiding in a guy in the company who one day I woke up and I thought, oh my God, he was in a relationship with another guy. He was so cool and relaxed. They were very successful. We all looked up to them. And I woke up one day, didn't hate myself for the first time, and realized I think I'm in love with this person, but there's nothing I can say about it because of his situation, Elise and me. So I went to Elise. I told her everything, the two of me, the fake and the gay. And she didn't do the this time when I told her. It was a mess. We were miserable. So I made a knee-jerk reaction to leave the company. I went to Balanchine, cried my eyes out. I'm in love with a guy, but he's with someone else. I just realized I'm gay. It's not going to go away like a pimple or a fever. Jerry's mean. All this to a man, Mr. Balanchine, who escaped the communist Soviet Union, right? Before near dying of pleurisy in the process. I escaped New Jersey, and I'm crying, carrying on. He's used to it. He said, don't quit, take a leave of absence, then the door will remain open. What a man. So now it's time to go home and tell Mom, my fabulous mother. She's visiting Florida. So I said, you're going to handle Dad. I took her out to the pool. She said, oh my God, we love Elise. You can't get back together. I said, no, it's not going to happen. Sorry, Mom. And I said, I think I have to be a Democrat too, because I think oh gosh, she hated that. All gays are supposed to be Democrats. I was not a Rhodes Scholar. And then she said, we wanted grandchildren. You sure? I said, no. She said, is it anything your father said or did? I said, no, Mom, I think I'll be able to accept myself someday. Not that. Are you sure you're a Democrat? She didn't care about the gay part. Okay. So now I'm going back to New York with nothing to do but take ballet classes. And John Kander of Kander and Ebb, the composers of Broadway musicals, he was seeing a guy in the company. John was about 41. Dancer was a little younger. And he had become like an uncle figure to me. And he said, why don't you audition for the dancers for my new show, Chicago? It's like, whoa, that sounds like fun. What have I got to lose? It was a cattle call. 200 guys went. 12 of us made it. Now we have to come back and sing. Uh-oh. Shades of Brigadoon. I said, no, that was fun. That's it. I'm not going back. John said, you have to go through with this. He practiced. If he didn't have a song, 11 triple threats, by the way, hunks, and me, the tubular ballet dancer. How I made it, I don't know. Apparently Fosse loved Balanchine and his works. I didn't learn that till years later. So John said, you're going to work with, if you didn't have a song, you sang Blue Skies. That's what they told you, so I'd have a song. So John said, I'm going to practice Blue Skies with you for a whole week, and then you're going to go back and you're going to face your fears. I was like, that's what my father should have been doing, but I don't really want to sing. So he practiced with me, told me my key was A minor. And the day of the audition, I was so scared that I walked to the liquor store on the way. Now, I wasn't a drinker, but I thought of our Aunt Mary, who was cranky until she had a few, and then she was the chanteuse of the family. So I thought, I'm going to follow in her freaking drunken footsteps and buy a bottle of something, blackberry-flavored brandy. Okay, then. So I get to the audition, And the only people in the audience are Candor and Ebb, Chita Rivera, Gwen Verdon, the leads, and Fosse. They're all sitting, but Fosse's doing this. First guy sings, Pavarotti, Eat Your Heart Out. And then Fosse jumps up on the stage. Well, I know you can dance, I know you can act. What else might you be able to do? Well, I'm a sword swallower. What? I was like, a quadruple threat? I can dance? What am I going to do? First sip, blackberry brandy in the dance bag. Second guy, Pavarotti number 2. What do you do? Well, I'm a contortionist and a gymnast and an acrobat. And then he goes on to do this freaking big sip number 2, times 11. Oops, it's my turn to get up there. I know my key, thanks to John. I go to the pianist, feeling no pain. Blue skies, A minor. Da-da-da-da-da-da. I took the position like, what is this? I did this. I looked like I was being arrested at gunpoint, but in a slightly better mood. Blue sky smiling at me, nothing. No movement quality suddenly, except an occasional Tourette's-inspired moment that had nothing to do with quality, never mind the rhythm of the song. I watched, as I sang, Gwen Verdon and Chita Rivera sink in their seats as I sang. I noticed the guys, I'm drunk, the guys disappear respectfully. Fosse does not jump up on the stage for the first time. Steve, I have a question for you. Yeah. Why did you ever leave the ballet? Not kidding. Oh, he said, it was just a lark. I didn't expect to get, and then Roadrunner exit, may run home, hungover at noon, I might add, my first hangover. And John Candor is buzzing at the door. Congratulations, you faced your fear. I was like, what? Why? Anyway, now what? Well, Lincoln Kirstein, the co-founder of the New York City Ballet, who brought Balanchine to the United States, called me. I was like, wow. He said, Balanchine misses you. He needs a boy. Consider coming back, but don't let the parade pass you by too quickly. So I was like, wow, do I want to go back and face the guy that I loved? Elise and her sadness, Jerome Robbins and his crap? No, but Balanchine invited you to dance with him once, never mind twice. I couldn't say no. Off I went. And there's Lincoln Kirstein with Mr. Balanchine. The minute I'm back, Mr. Balanchine is noticing my normal frustration with myself, and he took me aside and said, "Dear, you may not be our most powerful man, but you have the ability to connect the dots." And that was sort of the movement quality compliment, which meant the world to me. Then he gave me a principal role, the easiest part known to man in a ballet called The Four Temperaments, which was a gift. I mean, corps de ballet parts were harder than this, but this was a divine gift. So, good things were happening. Elise had a boyfriend, and we were friends again. And that guy that I loved invited me to the movies, and he said, we split up amicably, and would you like to? We were living together, and it was truly, for the time that it was, a match made in heaven. However, Robbins was up to his same old crap. Times 4 made me fourth cast instead of first cast. I'm a better dancer than I was when I left. I went to Balanchine crying. I won't go into detail, but it's personal. It's in the book. I went to Balanchine, and he said, he's box office, dear. We can do nothing about him, but now you know how not to treat other people. Well, that wouldn't happen today. Then I fell on stage at the peak of my career, my best dancing, and I came back from the injury too soon. And now I'll never be at that level as a dancer again. It was really horrible. My right foot, to just try to describe, was a long-distance phone call compared to an Insta dial. Now, dancers can understand that with an injury. So it was tough. But this is when I bought a used camera because I was recovering, and I'd been the snapshot king of the company. Here's a snapshot of Mr. B on our way to Russia in 1972, give or take. And who noticed me first fiddling with this used camera? was Mr. Balanchine. So when he walked over to me when I was sitting on the side in rehearsal, I said, do you mind if I take, because I know it's a closed world, do you mind if I take it? Before I could finish, he said, show me everything. I want to see what you see, which was so amazing. So I started experimenting in the wings, taking pictures of, getting used to light. Thanks to Martha Swope, the reigning dance photographer, theater photographer, movie photographer. She taught me how to develop a roll of film. She taught me how to make a print. And my partner was so handy, he made me a darkroom. So I was often running, doubling up with dancing and photographing. Baryshnikov, he never got tired, and Bernstein. Martha was very generous to me to teach me all that. One day, she was not available. Now, New York City Ballet was closed. You couldn't come photograph them if you were a staffer on a magazine, no matter how accomplished you were. Balanchine didn't trust them. So if Martha couldn't photograph a ballet, the review would not have a picture. The day Martha was so in demand, one day, maybe 3-4 months after I'm playing around with the camera, she was not available. Balanchine, without hesitation, said, send the Greek boy. And I shot for the New York Times, and that was the day that my second career was underway. His mentorship was incredible. He said, shoot down at her next time. She's supposed to be a doll. She'll look smaller when the light comes up and you see the scenery. I shot way down at this one in Berlin on tour. I said, isn't this cool? And he said, yeah, for an exhibition, but horrible for an ad, because people are going to think they're going to see that and they won't recognize it. I asked him around this time, should I quit dancing now that I've hurt myself and I'm in less roles? He said, no, I'll tell you when I think you can afford to support yourself. So publications were at me. This was like an overnight, oh my goodness, right place, right time. They all had specific needs. New York Times wanted light, tight, and vertical in case it was one column, coverage. Peter Martin's, that was Baryshnikov, as you know, before. Others wanted that, my least favorite angle, smack front, because they didn't want any surprises, with their readers. Well, that's what it looked like to me. Okay, it's not moving. Go. There we go. That's straight front. And then others said, oh, we trust him, he'll know what to throw away. So my favorite place was the wings. That's where I was either making an entrance or making an exit. I'd always been watching long before I had the camera. There's Lourdes Lopez on her way up the ladder, if you will. Balanchine was my favorite subject, but he had asked me early on, please don't get too close. It's a reason of vanity. I don't look the way I used to. I was handsome, believe it or not, he would say to me, but just stay a little bit further away. There he is coaching Baryshnikov with a partner named Nina. We were doing a filming in Nashville for PBS there. His gestures and his movements were so divine to take in. I mean, to run around a lady and have that position, she's normally on point, but he was showing her partner. It's ridiculously difficult. It's hard to explain. I learned as much from him as a human being, probably more, even more, or as much, I should say, as I did a dancer. Here's the one time I got close because he was watching Baryshnikov warm up before his first performance with us in July of '78. So it wasn't even a year when I owned this camera, right? Everyone expected that Peter Martins would take charge of the company. Balanchine never appointed him the heir apparent, but it was a given. And when Peter saw this picture, he said, I can't believe you took a picture of me in those pants with his Danish accent. I said, I can't believe you bought them. I mean, patchwork quilt, bell-bottom jeans, that should be against the law. And I don't know from fashion. I go into my closet, there was not a footprint on this shirt, so I wore it. I said to Peter, look forward to seeing that picture for the rest of your life because Balanchine is leading you here. Starting in the early 80s, Balanchine's health started to fail overnight and plummet, and we were all very nervous because we didn't know what was wrong. He didn't know what was wrong. The doctors didn't know, and dancers are trained not to speak. So we communicated in gestures and expressions, always, and the expressions were critically not good. We assumed that Peter would take charge. We just didn't want it to happen as soon as it wound up. Now, traditionally, Balanchine would bow on closing night, and normally those lights would be off backstage, but now he's really sick, and he needs his balance, and his vision is going. So you see he's holding the curtain for his balance. And our audience, you know, bad news travels fast, our audience got wind of the fact that Balanchine wasn't well and that no one knew what was wrong with him. So we always filled our houses then, 3,000 people. Closing night, that was the diehards. They bought their tickets 100 years in advance. The reaction when he came out, you know, I don't know, Yankee Stadium, end of the ninth, bases loaded, home run, times 10. They wouldn't let him leave because they felt that's our last time seeing it. They were right. 9 months later, on April 30th, 1983, Mr. Balanchine passed away, and we went into terrible, terrible mourning. Needless to say, not just us, the dance world, and others. Lincoln Kirstein took the stage that day that he died because there was a matinee, and he said Balanchine is with Tchaikovsky and Stravinsky now. The audience reaction, 9 months after that other reaction, sounded like 3,000 people just witnessed the world's worst possible accident known to man. It was heavy, heavy stuff. And now I'm alone as a photographer, even though I had stepped aside as a dancer in his condition, assuming he wouldn't know because of his health. I had retired about a year before. Now I'm full-time and he doesn't have my back. So I'm learning as I go the contrast between interacting with 100 people versus being in the darkroom all day, in the dark theater all night. God forbid you make a noise, you're out. Shushed by the very people that once applauded me. I had no fellow photographers, now I had just rivals. So I made a lot of mistakes, but blessedly, I was getting more work than I knew what to do with. It was pretty remarkable, and I know that came from Balanchine. It was just divine. I preferred black and white, always, but soon everyone required color. And the grain, I mean, just to not get technical, but you're working with film in the dark ages, and you have to push it to the nth to get, even though the light looks really bright to the naked eye, to the film, it was near dark. So I loved black and white. This is Susie Friedman. I think her mom, Laura's here. Okay, cool. Legs LaRue, we called her. Peter and Suzanne, McBride, Baryshnikov, Jacques Dembois. Peter Martins, he was about to go on stage to bow. I said, Peter, hey! Grab that. I was lucky. And then Joffrey, other companies were bringing me in as well. This, you might remember the turning point. This was the naughty little flirt, Sardinias. And here she is with Nureyev, who I had a wonderful relationship with, which is in the book. I won't go off on that. But this is him guesting with Joffrey, and he was a little long in the tooth for this kind of a role, Spectre de la Rose. But my God, look at the charisma. There he is with Robert Joffrey and Michael York. That's quite a smile. Yeah. So now and this is Makarova. I had a few moments to photograph ABT, which I just loved. Yvonne Naj, everyone's favorite partner at ABT. And Gelsey, my former 10-minute girlfriend, now a star of ABT, who said, don't photograph me today, I feel stiff. Yeah, we all want to be stiff like that someday. And Misha. And then color. They all wanted color. This is what, if I had been on stage with the dancers, this is the angle that Balanchine was bowing at, you know. In that last bow picture, Willie. Yeah. Darcy Kistler, she married Peter. The boring angle, some things worked from it. He jumped off the bar, landed on the floor, and lived, and continued to dance. Baryshnikov. Serenade, Bob Fosse's favorite ballet, and he insisted that this picture be in a documentary about him. Interesting. So he had use for me, if not a singer, you know. Peter and Suzanne, famous partnership, and Jules. Some of you may have seen Jules this weekend at Miami City Ballet. Baryshnikov and McBride in London. And McBride, gracious as ever. Twyla Tharp. See, I like the closer better. You know, now I'm frustrated because I'm at the mercy of the light, and I want to get into control lighting. So I bought some studio lighting, and I thought, well, I don't have room to do full body, but I'll start learning this with portraits. So I started experimenting with some of our beautiful dancers in the company, and that's about as much room as I had. Here's Lourdes as a baby, about to do Firebird for the first time on her way up that ladder. Kipling, beautiful dancer. Stephanie Salan, principal. So I was having a lot of fun, obviously playing with the tutus, not the way they were intended to be worn, but it was pretty great. In my travels, directors began asking me to teach. They'd been studying me while I photographed the dancers in the studio, and they thought, boy, he's telling them some interesting and important stuff. I was trying to get a third dimension out of them when they started off here. I mean, he went on to do some great photos with me, but I was trying to get him to move and be more three-dimensional. Lincoln Kirstein said about dance photography, the pictures must suggest previous and subsequent movement. And how much more perfect is that? And that was sort of a natural goal in me. So they were observing me, and they thought maybe I could teach their dancers, which was a whole new initial, oh my God, I'm not worthy, baseball bat out of the hand, the initial fear. But I thought about it for a while, and I thought, I've been scrutinizing dance since the Ed Sullivan Show. And then I had the superb training and the years of experience on the stage, overlapping that with camera, then and ever since, acutely studying the art form, noting what worked, what didn't, and why. So I was more ready to teach or learn how to teach, but trust me, just because you can dance doesn't mean you can teach. And any teacher will tell you it's ground zero. Things were different at New York City Ballet. Peter Martins was now director since '83. He promised to make me company photographer with the title and the benefits and the hoopla. Just be patient. I'm sure that came from Balanchine. Well, it didn't happen. Here we are 2 years later at the Rizzoli launch party for my book on Balanchine, which Peter wrote the foreword for. All these things are coming to me. No complaints. There's the cover of the book. And then a year later, Harry and Abrams wanted to do a book on Peter Martins. And there it is. So I'm not hurting for work. I'm making actually a killer living for an artist in New York during those times. Okay. Speaking of ballet life behind the scenes, right? Things were sure different again at City Ballet. It was, Jerry Robbins used to say in a rehearsal, if we did this instead of this, he would say, things are creeping in, baby. Like, whoa, things were creeping in. Administrations change. Of course, it's natural, right? It was 1990, just shy of 1990. City Ballet was my territory. I was reigning supreme. I got first refusal. I had all this great work. It involved all kinds of things, plus travels. But I was like a couple that you'd know, seen, maybe been a part of, where, damn, if you're over it. The couple is over, but damn, if you leave one another for all the freaking wrong reasons. That's why I was holding on to this seat of honor. Comparing that relationship to mine with my partner, we split up. We were very conservative. We had religious backgrounds. We were not worried about the other one cheating, but I didn't love where he was headed. And I'll leave it at that. But his manner in public was disingenuous. I was like, what's with the performance? You were so organic. AIDS was ravaging the world then. It was the late 80s, and gays were blamed. And we didn't talk about it. And we were not worried about being exposed to it, but it ravaged us in other ways. Definitely. He married a woman, and I went diving headfirst back into the closet. Not that far, because I know you can straighten your hair and straighten your room. But otherwise, I tried. Good luck. This is when I started photographing men. I had built a house in Long Island, and I love the relief of it, the air, the light, the beauty of it out there. Plus, I had the relief. Now I'm learning studio lighting. I know what existing light is. It's big pressure. And now I'm working with daylight. Here's the farmer on the way to my house who I bought my produce from. Here's the guy, one of the guys that built my house, sadly. Look at his unfortunate physique. And here's my cranky but effective personal trainer. That's Peter laughing his head off, by the way. It was also a way of me, when I started photographing men, a way of coming out with a safe distance with the camera between me and the subject. I had no plan for the pictures. I gave them to them. And so it went. In 1990, teaching on these photo gigs led to an invitation from Edward Villela to become his ballet master, one of them, and company photographer with his 5-year young Miami City Ballet. Once word was out that I accepted, the people at New York City Ballet called me, one of the new regime members, and she said, "Do you mind if we stop paying your health insurance?" And I said, "It's been 7 years since I quit. Why?" She said, "When Balanchine heard you left," I was like, oh my God, he was in his deathbed then. "When he heard you left, he made us promise that we would pay your health insurance for the rest of your life because he was worried you wouldn't be able to support yourself as a photographer." Hello, part king, part father, my lord. I said, of course, stop paying it. And off I am to reinvention number 3 as a ballet master. Well, here's Ileana Lopez and her husband, Franklin Gamero, in the lead in Rubies, and they're here today, and they're stunning. They haven't changed a freaking bit. Anyway, they were so beautiful to work with. This was a big, big change, and I was very self-conscious. I didn't have to know just my steps anymore. I had to know everybody's steps and work a group on the stage and adjust that group to different stages. I was not a natural at this. Yes, I loved it, and yes, I was fussy, but oh my goodness, it took me for freaking ever to learn everyone else's steps. But it was an amazing experience, and I grew as a teacher as a result of these wonderful people. Here are some pictures of Miami City Ballet. There's Ileana Lopez. Yeah, I mean, look how effortless. And this is Marin Boyaru in Prodigal Son. See, now I have a studio, not just a corner of my living room. So now I can play with full body in the studio. Ileana and Franklin in a ballet by Jimmy Gaminet de los Heroes. Beautiful man and choreographer who we lost recently to freaking COVID, thank you. And there they are, and this is more of a studio shot where I have controlled light so this reproduces better for certain publications. And of course we had fun, always, yeah. Got a lot of coverage. I had more connections than I realized I had once I left New York. And Ileana, fun, and of course the opening picture. Men started reaching out to me when I got to Miami right after I arrived because I had done an exhibit in New York at Lincoln Center before I left. I did an exhibit at my entrance to Miami Beach, and I had a lot of good press. And so they had read about this. So actors, musicians, models were reaching out, and I was extending that, whatever it was. I had no idea where it was going, collecting photographs of various men in different walks of life. I know he wanted to be a model. I don't know. I just gave them the pictures. Yeah, Billy. He still looks like that, by the way, 30 years later. Nureyev gave me this hat. It was made for him by Korinska, and it was in a production. And when a production was over, I treasure it. And I put this actor in it because I thought he has the right charisma to pull it off. Otherwise, you'd look like, I don't know what. You'd either look like a grandmother or a compelling guy. You know, I saved 3 years of Miami City Ballet as ballet master and photographer. I learned plenty. And then I wanted to move to New York. I got as far as Palm Beach, where I was introduced to Marie Hale and Ballet Florida. Now, they were the same young 8 years old as Miami City Ballet, and we were introduced. And Palm Beach Illustrated contacted me right away, and they said, do some artistic director photos. It was such a great opportunity, and Marie was one of them. So I borrowed this frame, and others that I remember, one was Demetrius Klein, and they requested a nude of him, and I thought, wow, how progressive for this zip code, never mind 1993. At Ballet Florida, it was a great 10-year period, 93 to 03. I taught the company. I brought in 12 ballets through my connections. Who knew that I was able to do that? But I knew everybody. Jerome Robbins had just passed. I knew his rep. So I brought in 12 really great ballets and went to bat for the cheapest possible. Raphael Clementi nicknamed me the Velvet Hammer a couple years ago when we worked together. I guess I was really learning how to work for an organization to their benefit financially then. So it was sort of a prelude to development, which came later. And I also started writing for them in the closet, albeit under the name of someone else, but the board director wanted a speech. Marie asked me to correct a letter. So I got incredible experience during my time with them. And of course, with my blessed connections, I got them all kinds of global coverage. Some pictures of Ballet, Florida. That's not a self-portrait, I'm sorry to say. And this time, because they could only afford to pay me like $10 a month, so they call me artistic liaison. And so I had time to do all kinds of other shoots, like Jeffrey Bean in New York, and Frank Sinatra. Shirley, 10-year anniversary of the Kravis as the hostess for the big gala. The Sisters, Sister Act, outtake, fun, very nice girls. Talk about talent. Donna Summer. Patti LuPone, we went back to childhood. Not shy. The one day Celine dresses like the man I always wanted to be. She's in that freaking outfit. No wonder she never sent me back the pictures with me with my love letter asking for an autograph. She was like, what was I thinking? I don't know. And Patti LuPone, yeah. You know, in 1995, the Governor's Club asked me to do an exhibition on dance, men, and fashion because they'd been following my career. And I thought, well, here's a perfect guy for it, in construction. All different looks of people. Again, sorry, that's not a self-portrait, an actor model. One of the crew members of Kravis named Buck, who we all loved so much, he's no longer with us, but what a great subject, one of my favorites ever. A model. Bodybuilders were coming to me. They wanted pictures of themselves looking like this before they didn't look like this anymore. Always looking very angry and tough, yeah. And one of my favorite dancers with Ballet Florida, who was a great character dancer, this is him as the ugly stepsister in their production of Cinderella. So I said, we're going to Worth Avenue. We're going to teach these ladies how to dress. The cars were going off the road. They were honking. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. That was, I don't know, 95 maybe, yeah? And the fashion thing that I started getting involved in, I grew a whole new respect for that industry. I was not a clothes person. I never looked at those magazines. But I learned and realized that the clothes are the stars, not the movement, which I was used to. But the model has to remain compelling. It was tough, and I took forever to do it. When I worked with dancers in fashion shoots, that was okay if they were covered up, but their muscle tone was actually beautiful but distracting from the clothes, from the products. For here, perfect example of perfect women here, but they're not overly pumped, you know? We're looking at the clothes, or should be, and they take a back seat. Anyway, this shoot, the art director, they called me afterwards and she said, I can't believe how much time you took. It was like 14 hours yesterday. We're so glad, it was the whole spread too. We're so glad we're not paying you by the hour. I said, the trainer of the cat had it on drugs. She said it was depressed. So she gave it a tranquilizer. The cat was, I'm not kidding, for hours. And the last shot I had was the freak cover. So the models were gone, the shoot was done, and the cat was like, I don't think so. Fine, I said, what's your cat? She said, it was depressed. You know, there's one of those people that hates people and loves animals. I mean, we know them. I mean, it's many more of us today for different reasons we won't go into. Anyway, I was doing this to the cat, trying to get it to freaking wake up and make one nasty little expression. It took me hours to get that. Anywho, plus during my time at Ballet Florida, I had all these great dance companies. Baryshnikov's in his 50s, back dancing in his new company. Ballet Oklahoma, which changed its name to Oklahoma Ballet, thank God, because who wants the initials BO for your dance company? There's enough of that as it was. Momix, that's the shot they used of Demetrius in the Palm Beach Illustrated spread. Connor Walsh, principal of Houston Ballet. This is actually a dance company. Yeah, they're cool. Streb, Action, it's called. Palabolis. You know, Mia Michaels, she was a judge on So You Think You Can Dance. This was a cover shoot for Dance Magazine. Loved working with her. This was a calendar for Dance Magazine. He was in Paul Taylor. Dance Theater of Harlem. Momix. Dance Theater of Harlem. Demetrius Outtake. I preferred this picture, but they went with the other one, and I understand that. Yeah. This is Lisa Giobbi Movement Theater. She never did anything on the ground, which I found pretty remarkable. Joffrey. Carabas of the Royal Ballet, The Wicked Witch. This is the bow when everybody booed. This is a guy. And speaking of guys dressed up as women, this is a drag company called Grand Diva. I loved him. Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mova was his stage name. This is some of the group. And here's a very serious moment from Romeo when he thinks she's dead, but she's in fact just drugged. I love that. And recently, you know, Miami City Ballet and Ballet Palm Beach, their beautiful production of Romeo and Juliet right here at the Kravis Center. And Boca Ballet Theater, a beautiful production of their students plus guest artists of Swan Lake. Sarah Murrens of New York City Ballet, and there she is on the cover of a magazine. The Kravis Center was aware of my history in the arts, and Lee Bell, the senior director of programming, called me in 2000 and he said, "We'd like you to do some interviews with artists before and after performances." And I was very self-conscious. I had never spoken before, and those shades of "shut up, you sound like a girl" came running at me. But at this juncture, I became aware of a need for me and a belief in my capabilities. So that was winning the battle in my paranoid head. Balanchine needed me twice. And then as a photographer, and as a result, my images are needed for the rest of time. And now, well, a need for me as a teacher came along and as a ballet master, and now a new need, in Lee Bell's words, for someone who walked the talk and who understands artists and their emotional constitutions. So you saw some of these. Here's how I began, you know, with students. Yeah. And Lee Wolf, who I had to bring a picture in of, I snuck this picture of her at her farewell a couple years ago, board member, one of the founders of Kravis, and a divine human being, very much involved in the education program here. This was her great farewell here. Michael Feinstein. Marcelo Gomez of ABT at the time. She put me through the ringer, Dr. Ruth. The honor of Alex Dreyfus. Wendy Whalen, who went on to become co-director of New York City Ballet from here. And of course, Iris, who I've known for 27 years, and she'll call me and say, "You were supposed to call me on the 17th. And I'm like, how do you remember that? I don't remember what side of the bed I got up on today. She's so sharp. In 2003, after 10 years after leaving Miami City Ballet, I got a call from them to become their director of development. And I thought, wow, they'd been watching all the things I'd been doing and accomplishing for Ballet Florida, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, wow, that's big. In essence, I'd be going from putting a ballet on the stage, training a dancer, taking a pretty picture to get on, you know, all the magazines, to being responsible for keeping a company alive and well, with a team, of course. The art form that gave me a life, the art form that gave me safe haven to come out as a gay man and embrace me in the process. How could I refuse, however scared I was? But not without asking Marie Hale if she'd like me to help her lead her company. Because I was reading those, I was making those letters for those people on the team, and I was seeing where they weren't financially. And I said, you want me to help you lead? You can put me in the closet. I've been in there most of my life. You can hide me. I just don't want to leave you. But she wasn't interested. So I took the offer at my Emmy City Ballet, and finally my fifth and last reinvention, fundraising. The first check I brought my first day bounced, $10,000. Oh, well. It was cleared eventually. I had to check my dance clothes, I had to check my cameras, but it was a bigger picture here, saving this art form. Biggest perk, and I won't go into more detail, the board. They had a Palm Beach board, and these were accomplished people, no egos. They had done what they'd done in their lives, devoted to keeping this company alive. So it was fantastic, and I learned tons. 3 years with Miami City Ballet, 2 years with Palm Beach Drama Works, and for the last 6 years now, Rosie's Theater Kids in New York, which I adore. In 2009, while I was with DramaWorks, I received a call from this Emmy-winning PBS documentary maker, Deborah Novak, who said, I've been following your career since your Billy Elliot beginnings, and I want to do a film about you. I thought it was a friend fooling around. But then she went on to say she was a dancer. Her brother and my brother were partners in the same law firm in New York, big real estate law firm, and she'd been really looking closely at my life. Well, here's another transition, and I'm getting old for this. I hadn't been freelance in 20 years, but of course I took the plunge. What an honor. Nothing easy about the process. It took 2 years to complete the film, during which time I had to travel to every city she went to interview people, along with me. Before it started airing, the Kravis Center in this very building generously had a screening for a big audience and a lovely interview afterwards with Deb and the late divine Terry Teachot. A day or so later, it premiered at Lincoln Center. How ironic and how appropriate, where my whole life as a dancer started. And then it began airing. Stephen Caras, See Them Dance is what it's called, from 11 through 14, and Deb won her Emmy in 2012, and so did I. That's in my bedroom with me. I'm very proud of that. So no, I can't believe it. I mean, thanks to Deb. So I've been a freelancer, as the film noted, ever since, with a very special focus on my book, Rosie's Theater Kids, and securing a permanent home for my photographic archive. It has to be an institution devoted to making all images available and the stories associated with them at the touch of a button for all needs globally until the end of time, because I will not live forever. That's a promise, but this must. Now, in closing, I think you need a Chita Rivera update. In 2014, I have to tell you this, I received the Career Transition for Dancers Heart and Soul Award thanks to Anka Palis, who started this divine organization over 40 years ago to help dancers in transition. Boy, I could have used them first time around, but they noted my survival instinct and honored me with this. And at their annual gala, Chita Rivera was the hostess who was going to give me this award 40 years after my divine singing for her at the Chicago audition. So here I am accepting the generous night in the beginning, and then she got up and talked about me, and I had to come up. Here I am, freaked, like hunched over, loving her, and then first date, kiss on the lips, that's my award. It's right next to my bed, and I got to dance with her. I mean, Chita freaking Rivera, 40 years later. But the day before, we had lunch with the officials, and they were all, well, maybe she should come on. Well, maybe he should come on. And we were like two bad dancers together like this. At this point, just shove us out. We don't care. We weren't even listening. We were bad kids. Went to the same School of American Ballet, had similar teachers, and we were yattering and giggling, and I was in awe. And finally had the guts to say, you know, you sank in your seat when I sang for the Chicago audition. And of course she's going to say, oh, honey, I don't remember that. I'm sure you were fine. No. Her face dropped. 3 words. That was you? Thank you very much, everybody. If you have questions, let me know. Anybody? There are microphones around if anybody wants to ask me anything. But we're cool. I think I covered my whole life and then some. When is the book coming out? Well, I have one publisher that's interested, but I'm just going to take my time with it. I would say by the end of the year, next year. Sometime within the next 12 months, I think we're going to make, yeah. Anyway. No questions? Yes? Will I have a hard copy of my photos in my book? Yeah, you know what I'd like to do is a big coffee table, finally, because I don't look back at reproduction and when it was filmed. It's just not what the picture really can be. So I would love one of those big. So in conjunction with the autobiography, that's my goal. That's my goal. Yeah. Don't say gay? What about don't say gay? Yikes. Yeah, how much time have you got? I cannot believe, as Rome freaking crumbles, Ukraine and otherwise, let's just grow up before we blow up. That's my motto. Had we only said gay when I was a kid, I wouldn't have been in the closet for 300 years and more comfortable there ever since. So, that's why God invented shrinks. Thank you, everybody.